Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our Fiqh Hour, the episode 6 on Hajj particular series. And today will be, inshallah, the final session on the Hajj series. We've already completed the full details about the importance of performing Hajj, the penalty or the problems of not performing Hajj. We then went through the process of preparation for Hajj, all the sharait that needs to be in place. We then explained the actual performance of Hajj, the days, the 5 days in particular, from the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. And then we discussed the manner in which to perform Umrah. And finally, we talked about the 3 types of Hajj, Qiran, Tamattu, and Ifrad. And today we will finish things off on the offenses, the jinayat, in which penalties need to be given. And also we'll speak a little bit about visiting the Prophet ﷺ. Then there's a couple of questions which have come in via our Markaz al-Ifta wal Qāḍī, so I'll answer them. And then that will wrap us up, because normally we have Fiqh Hour on Mondays and Thursdays. Monday will be Eid, inshallah. So there won't be a Fiqh Hour on Monday, and probably not on Thursday either. So just keep an eye on our socials. Inshallah, we'll let you know when the next session will start again. I know I have a few programs coming up in June as well as July, so I will try to get back onto that regular as well. But as I said, watch this space. So let's talk about the offenses. Obviously, there are rules that need to be followed when a person is in the state of ihram. And generally speaking, it is being in the state of ihram when a person makes an error, depending on the gravity of the error, either a dam, meaning an animal has to be slaughtered, or a sadaqah needs to be given. But similarly, there are also certain actions that need to be performed, and if omitted, or if the sequence has been rearranged, then again, there is dam due, again, a slaughtering of an animal. And if one isn't really too clued up on the rules of performing Hajj, then it could be quite an expensive occasion. It's an expensive occasion anyway, obviously, if you take all the traveling into consideration. Obviously, for those people who are self-employed or have to work to earn rather than can take time off. On top of that, obviously, it's the hotel stay. And then if you're going to be scoring penalties, not in a good way, left, right, and center, then it can actually add up, and it can accumulate to quite a problem. So it's important that people understand. Okay, so that's why this is probably as more important than anything else. 2 areas in which these violations fall under, 2 broad sections. One is violating the restrictions of ihram, which is what I mentioned. And the second one is violating the sanctity of the haram. So what about the violating the restrictions of ihram? It says it can be divided into sort of 4 broad sections. The first one requires the sacrificing of an animal in order to atone for the violation. So the word dam is used. Dam is Arabic for blood, dal mim. So all it means is the sacrificing of an animal, the giving of an animal in order to repair and atone for that error that has been committed. Number 2 requires the giving of sadaqah. So that's the second one. So obviously that's a considerably lesser violation if all it requires is sadaqah. The third one requires one to pay less than the above sadaqah. So that's just, a small amount, however one determines a small amount to be. And the fourth requires one to pay the value in cash or other. And we'll get to that, inshallah. Okay, so there's 4 areas. The key one, obviously, that one needs to be wary of and one needs to be well equipped for is the one which requires dam, because that's the most expensive one. Sadaqah usually is around sort of £5, something like that. And obviously something less than sadaqah is even less than £5. Now, it's advised when you've come out of ihram and you finish that you should be giving some sadaqah anyway, in case you made some minor violations which you may have not remembered or may have overlooked, whereas obviously one cannot overlook the major violations which require them. So, for example, if a person who is baligh and is in the state of ihram performs any of the following acts, then they need to give dam. Okay, they need to give dam. The violations are the applying of perfume to a limb of one's body. Okay, so if a person applies perfume to a limb of one's body, what is considered as a limb? It's quite obvious, but let's just go into a little bit more detail. The head is considered as a limb. The calf is considered as a limb. Some people might think, the whole leg is a limb, but because the leg is quite a sizable portion of a person's body, it can actually be nearly half the person's height. Therefore, the leg is split into two. We have one which is the bit up to the knee, and then the other bit which is beyond the knee. So the calf or the thigh, or something which is similar in size. Or he dyes his hair with hair dye, or he rubs oil or something similar onto his body, or he wears stitched clothing for a complete day, or he covers his head for a complete day, or he shaves a quarter of his head, or he cuts the nails of his hand and feet in the same sitting, or he cuts all the nails of one hand, or he neglects a necessary act of Hajj. So let's just quickly recap. Applying of perfume onto a limb, dyeing hair, rubbing oil or something similar onto the body, wearing stitched clothing for a complete day, covering the head for a complete day, shaving minimum a quarter of the head, cutting the nails of the hand and feet, meaning some nails on the hand and some nails on the feet, or cutting all the nails on one limb, i.e. all on the hand or all on one foot, or neglecting a wajib. In all of these cases, there is a slaughter that is required. Why? Because there are narrations which clearly the Prophet ﷺ has spoke about them. When is sadaqah required? Okay, so sadaqah is considerably less. Dam can be, 200, 250 pound, depending on the cost of the animal in the haram. You'd have to make inquiries. But if you didn't, the sadaqah, as I said, is around £5, £10. Again, the value you'd have to ask when you're in the performing Hajj. So one is required to pay sadaqah if he perfumes less than a limb. So we've already given a definition of a limb. He wears stitched clothing for less than a day. So it's the same error, but either the volume or either the quantity is less or the duration is less. So when it comes to applying perfume, it's the quantity is less, meaning less than a limb. So it might just be like in the palm of one's hand or on top of one's shoulder or something like that. And similarly, when it comes to stitched clothing, it's not for a whole day, but it might be for a few hours. Covers the face for less than a day, covers the head for less than a day, shaves less than a quarter of the head, only cuts one nail. Okay, so same things, but consider, so if as long as you remember the maximum, that as soon as I trigger past this point is going to be dam, then anything less than that is going to be sadaqah. If one performs tawaf al-qudum or tawaf al-sadr in a state of minor impurity, meaning they are not in the state of wudu, or they neglect a circuit from tawaf al-sadr, or he leaves out a pebble from one of the three sides, the jamarat that he has to pelt, then he is liable for sadaqah. And for every circuit of tawaf al-sadr, and for each pebble which he neglects, sadaqah has to be given. So he adds all those up. The sadaqah that one must give for each offense mentioned is half a sa of wheat or its value in cash. So locally, obviously in the UK, half a sa is about £2, £2.50 approximately. So, but obviously the person is in Saudi Arabia, so they will determine the value there. So it might be something like 5, 6, 7 riyals or something like that. But as I said, ask the ulama in that area and they will give you the value. Most likely the group that you're traveling with, if there's a scholar with you, he would have done that research for you, so he would have that value for you. Now, remember, we said there was four levels. One was dam, we've explained dam. One was sadaqah, we've explained sadaqah. And then the third one was less than sadaqah. So if a person kills a louse, singular for lice, or a locust, then for him is to give sadaqah of whatever amount he wishes. So obviously, if it's half a sa is going to be for a slightly more serious violation, then as this is considered as a lesser violation, then he can give maybe 2-3 riyal, something like that. Okay. Now, this is somewhat not really useful because of the fact that we don't hunt animals in the haram anymore. As I mentioned before, as a joke, the things we hunt now are Pizza Hut, KFC, and Wendy's, and Al-Baik, and places like that. That's where we go hunting now. There's no hunting really in the haram. So I'm not necessarily going to share the hunting masail with you because it's just going to confuse you, because what's the point? We don't do it. But if for whatever reason you end up going hunting whilst in the haram, then ask the ulama what the penalties are. Okay. So the sacrifice of the animal, which is a sheep usually, it must be at least a year old if it's a sheep. If it's a cow, then it must be at least 2 years old. And if it is a camel, then the minimum age is 5 years old. So we do not give, this is for the hadya, we do not give the hadi to be like a cockerel or something smaller. It is a sheep that's minimum a year old, a cow 2 years old, and a camel which is 5 years old. When it comes to dam, I've mentioned this previously, what do you give? Do you give a sheep? Do you give a goat? Do you give a cow? Do you give a camel? Then a sheep suffices for all the violations that have been mentioned, except, however, only one. And that one is if one performs tawaf ziyarah, which is a pillar of Hajj, in the state of janaba. Okay, in the state of janaba, meaning that he needs ghusl, or he indulges in sexual intercourse after the standing of Arafah, before shaving or cutting of the hair, in which case it becomes necessary to sacrifice either a cow or camel in both situations. So they are the only two occasions. One is that in a state of janaba, this person performs tawaf ziyarah. And secondly is that before he has cut or shaved his hair, after standing in Arafah, he engages in intercourse with his wife. When picking an animal for hadi, it's very similar to what we do here in the UK in terms of the qurbani, is that we has to make sure that the animal is free from any defect, physical defect, and neither that it is limping or anything of that nature, or that it's missing any sort of key body parts. When is the hadi slaughtered? This is again for the two people who go for as a form of shukr. This is for those who perform tamattu, and for those who perform qiran, then they will need to do a slaughter. The time of slaughtering the offering for the qiran form of Hajj or the tamattu form is in the 3 days of Nahar. And as we've mentioned already previously, normally this is done on the 10th. As soon as the large jamara has been pelted, people start to make their way walking down to Mecca, start walking down towards the Kaaba in order to perform the circumambulation. But what they do is they wait until they get news that the animal has been slaughtered. When they find out that the animal has been slaughtered, they can now come out of ihram by cutting and shaving their head. They will do that, they will bathe, but they cannot have intimacy until obviously the tawaf ziyarah has been done. Once that tawaf has been done, which they will perform, then after that, yes, they can. And obviously they will then make their way back up to Mina, for they will spend the day and the evening there and carrying out the jamara pelting on the 11th and 12th. And then they'll make their way back to their hotels. If one is slaughtering for other than this reason, meaning they did not do Quran, they did not do tamattu, but there's a penalty that they have incurred, then they can slaughter at any time. There is no specific time as long as it happens in the haram. The place of slaughtering, as I've just mentioned there, is in the sacred area of the haram, and one cannot specify the slaughtering in Mina unless obviously it's a voluntary one, then they can. But other than that, it must take place in that area. So that brings our discussions to a close with regards to performing Hajj. We're going to just touch upon now visiting the Prophet ﷺ, because whilst you are in Saudi Arabia, it makes sense. It's a rare opportunity for you to go and make salam to the Prophet ﷺ. Obviously, for women, it can be generally more challenging. They don't tend to give access to ladies to give salam. I don't know if that situation has changed, but whenever I've been there or experienced it, then they tend not to let ladies go there, but they do let the chaps go there. So therefore, is it permissible? Is it something that should be encouraged? We know that visiting the graves of the deceased to take ibrah, to take lesson, to reflect over the finiteness of this life is something which we have been encouraged, and also to supplicate for the deceased. And we know the Prophet ﷺ used to visit the graves regularly, and also he says that I used to prohibit you from ziyarat al-qubur, fazuruha, now visit the qubur, the graves. He says, the Prophet ﷺ said, Zurul Qubur, visit the graves, فَإِنَّهَا تَذْكُرُ بِالْمَوْتِ, because it will remind you of death. So this was something that he was encouraged. Similarly, he traveled, he walked past والسلام, the graves of Medina, and he turned towards them with his face and he said, Assalamu alaikum ya ahl al-qubur, yaghfirullahu lana wa lakum, antum salfana wa nahnu bil athar. That, peace be upon you, O people, residents of the grave. May Allah forgive us and forgive you. You have preceded us and we are following you. Then they should visit the resting place of the Prophet ﷺ, because this is even more so significant for obvious reasons. We know that this the resting place of the Prophet ﷺ is right next to the original masjid, which you get access to, which is usually carpeted in a different color, and you get opportunity to pray 2 rakats nafil there. And the distance between there where you pray, and you'll be able to see it if you look over your left shoulder, a kind of netted structure in which the resting place is of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ has encouraged visiting the Masjid al-Haram, obviously, and his masjid. He says, "La tashuddu rihal illa ila thalath masajid," that you should not set out to travel except for 3 masjids, meaning all masjids are equal. Don't go out of your way to go pray in a particular masjid because you think, oh, this masjid is afzal. No, every masjid is equal. However, there are 3 masajids in which you should endeavor to travel there. What are those? He says, Masjidi hada, my masjid, this masjid, yani Masjid Nabwi. Also, Al-Masjid al-Haram, yani where the Kaaba is in Mecca, and Masjid al-Aqsa. So these are 3 masjids in which there is more virtue in praying in them. And because there is more virtue in praying in them, we should obviously make effort to attend there and pray there. So that's another reason to attend Masjid Nabwi. He's also mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ, that a prayer in my masjid is better than 1,000 prayers in any other masjid except the Masjid al-Haram. Okay. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ said, Man hajja, that person who makes hajj and does not visit me, faqad jafani, because he has turned away from me. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ said, if anyone comes to visit me for no other reason except visiting me, it is a duty for me to be his intercessor on the day of rising. The Prophet ﷺ said, if anyone makes hajj and visits my grave after my death, it is like he visited me whilst I was alive. So we get numerous understandings about the encouraging of visiting the Prophet ﷺ. So obviously, when we're visiting the Prophet ﷺ, we need to instill in our hearts that who are we about to stand in front of? You know, the fact that you're a Muslim, your name, the food you eat, the way you dress, every aspect of your life has been instructed to you by this man. And who is this man? This man has been in the company of Allah. This man has been in the company of Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. This man has had the revelation descend upon his heart. So you should build that awe inside of you that you're not just visiting any person, you're visiting the greatest creature ever. Okay. So therefore, the person should be serious. There should be no joking around as he's walking or waiting to attend. There should be tranquility. They should be somewhat fearful that maybe Allah discloses to the Prophet ﷺ the lack of effort, the lack of sincerity in us, and he may be disappointed in us. So therefore, this should be, which one should bear this in mind when visiting. It is sunnah for a person whom Allah SWT has bestowed his blessings upon by assisting him to perform Hajj and Umrah, then travel to Medina of the Messenger to visit him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And not only are you visiting him, as you will know, there are two other graves there, and that is the grave of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab and Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhuma. So it is another great virtue that you get. So when you're standing in front, you will see that there'll be a small orifice. Don't bow your head down when you're looking. If you really feel the urge to look through it, then bend your knees. It's the usual thing they teach you when you're exercising or lifting heavy weights, that don't bend your back, but bend your knees. Because if you bend your back, it looks like you're bowing to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is not something that is encouraged, whether even if a person did not intend that, that's what it looks like from a distance. So bend your knees to keep your back straight if you wish to look through. Otherwise, you know, there's no need to stare. Stand in front of the place and pause for a moment in obedience if the opportunity arises, and adhere to the boundaries of etiquette. And remember, the Prophet ﷺ said, there's not a person that sends salutations upon me except that Allah returns my soul and I return the salam. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ said, no one sends salutations upon me from my ummah except that Allah sends him 10 salams, and for the reason salutation is to be made in abundance. So it's a great opportunity that you have that last point. And being in the city of Medina, I could carry on a little bit more, but I think that suffices our discussions for today. And being in Medina, know that the Prophet ﷺ walked in those particular streets. That this is where he would have grown up. This is where he would have moved around. You know, he lived there ﷺ for around 10 years. So therefore, much of around the masjid is places that he would have walked. And find the various places in which the Prophet ﷺ would go, you know, on a Saturday, where he would pray and try to complete as much of those sunan as possible. So, as I said, that brings us to the end of this Hajj special series of 6 episodes in which we've covered, in a basic way. I didn't want to go into too much detail because then when you get too much information, it becomes a little bit overbearing. This will be sufficient for 70, 80, 90% of people. Then, obviously, there will always be the specifics that arises. Those individuals can then reach out either to their own local ulama that are traveling with them, or if they have contacts of ulama on their phone, or you know, they can reach out onto our Markaz al-Ifta wal-Qāḍī. I'll try to be a little bit more alert over the next sort of few days to respond to questions in order to resolve potential people's issues, inshallah. We know obviously that Sunday is the 10th for in Saudi, so that will make Friday the 8th, which is tomorrow. So tomorrow the days of Hajj will start in Saudi, so therefore people will be right now preparing. They're a few hours ahead, so people will be right now preparing to go to sleep, knowing that tomorrow they will be setting off after Fajr to head and start their journey from Mina to Muzdalifah to Arafah, whatever. Sorry, the other way around, Arafah, Muzdalifah, and then return back to Mina. So anyway, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all those people who are performing Hajj, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them from any errors. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Nearly went before giving my last questions. Let me just deal with these questions before we part company. Okay, so one question here. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, I can't really help with that one. That's just a long question. That's of no use. Here we go. Assalamu alaikum. Hope Mufti Sahib is all well and good. When I got married a number of years ago under family peer pressure, I purchased an expensive ring for my wife. My wife at that time My wife at that time didn't know that I was not happy to buy this for her. Okay, let me read that. Messages coming in. When I got married a number of years ago under family peer pressure, I purchased an expensive ring for my wife. My wife at that time didn't know that I was not happy to buy this for her and that there was family pressure on me then. I regret being pressurized by them and not being brave enough to make my own decision. Then recently, in the last 2 years or so, something came about and I ended up telling her about this. Since then, she refuses to take ownership of this ring and says that I should take it back and also pay zakat on it. But I'm refusing to take it, saying that the ring belongs to you now. In Sharia perspective, does it still belong to her, and who has to pay zakat on it? Yes, it still does belong to her, but she can return it back to you. And as long as she offers it to you and you accept, it becomes yours. So you had already offered it to her when you married her and she accepted. So therefore the transfer of ownership had taken. Now if she no longer wants it, she can return it back to you. But obviously you'd have to accept. Once you accept, then that's it, it becomes yours. The transfer of ownership has taken place. So for now, the ownership is the wife. And if the ownership is the wife, she is the one that needs to give zakat. Okay. One more question that we had was this one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam. A lady has traveled the Shari'i distance and is praying Qasr Salah at her destination, Makkah. While she is a Musafir in Makkah, her menses starts. She then leaves her current destination while on her menses and travels again a distance of 240 plus miles to Medina. At the new destination, Medina, she is unable to pray as she is on her menses. My question is, when she will be clean and out of her menses, will she be classed as a Musafir or Muqim? As she would have not traveled after she comes out of her Hayd, she will be considered as a Muqim unless she travels. It's the traveling distance that needs to be performed when she is in that state. Oh, hold on a second. While she's Musafir in her menses start. Yeah, but she's already Musafir. Sorry, let me take that back. A lady has traveled the Shari distance and is praying Qasr Salah destination. So she's already a Musafir. As she's already a Musafir, the Hukm of Musafir continues on her. So the Hukm doesn't leave her because she was a Musafira there. It's only if she ceased to be, if in Makkah she became a Muqima. But because she didn't become a Muqima in Makkah, as it suggests here, that she continued to be a Musafira whilst in Makkah as she was staying less than 15 days, then that is the Hukm of her. She is a Musafira and she will continue to be under that Hukm. So there's no change there as far as I can see. As I said, it's just the way it's been written. I did ask for clarification, but I think that's my take on it from my understanding there. Okay, so that's that. I don't think there's anything else. Okay, I think that's done. So this time we're definitely saying wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.